the idea that Iran is about to get a nuclear weapon is just a couple weeks or months away. This is something that you would believe only if you're completely unaware of the history of these fear-mongering campaigns from Netanyahu and the Israeli government. They've been saying exactly the same thing for at least 15 years now. I just want to show you a little bit of this. Here's The Guardian from September of 2012, which is 13 years ago. The headline, Benjamin Netanyahu demands a, quote, red line to stop the Iran nuclear program. Israel's prime minister tells the UN General Assembly that Iran is more than 70% of the way to producing a nuclear weapon. Netanyahu marked a line near the top of the bomb. He drew a graphic of a bomb, and there was a line there, beyond which he said Iran should not be allowed to pass. That line, representing 90% of the way to making a warhead, would be reached by next spring, at most by next summer. Netanyahu added, quote, from there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb. Now, at the time, there was actually a leaked report from Mossad in 2012 that said that was actually completely false. There you see from The Guardian, a leaked cable shows that Netanyahu's Iran bomb claim was contradicted by Mossad. There's that little primitive graphic that he nonetheless showed to the UN, knowing it was false based on his own intelligence. But this is the sort of thing that the Israeli government has been doing for quite a long time. Here's what The Guardian said about that, quote, Benjamin Netanyahu's dramatic declaration to world leaders in 2012 that Iran was about a year away from making a nuclear bomb was contradicted by his own secret service, according to a top secret Mossad document. Brandishing a cartoon of a bomb with a red line to illustrate his point, the Israeli prime minister warned the UN in New York that Iran would be able to build nuclear weapons the following year and called for action to halt that process. But in a secret report shared with South Africa a few weeks later, an Israeli intelligence agency concluded that Iran was, quote, not performing the activity necessary to produce weapons. The Mossad briefing about Iran's nuclear program in 2012 was in stark contrast to the alarmist tone set by Netanyahu, who has long presented the Iranian nuclear program as an existential threat to Israel and a huge risk to world security. Behind the scenes, Mossad took a different view. In a report shared with South African spies on October 22nd, 2012, but likely written earlier, it conceded that Iran was, quote, working to close gaps in areas that appear legitimate, such as enrichment reactors, which will reduce the time required to produce weapons from the time the instruction is actually given. But the report also states that Iran, quote, does not appear to be ready to enrich uranium to the higher levels necessary for nuclear weapons. To build a bomb requires enrichment to 90%. Mossad estimated that Iran then had about 100 kilograms of material enriched to 20%. Iran has always said it is developing a nuclear program for civilian energy purposes. These are the people who have lied continuously. These are the people who told you Iraq had a nuclear program, that Saddam was in the market for nuclear weapons, that he had biological and chemical weapons, which induced people to invade Iraq at huge cost to the United States, to Iraq, to the entire region. Who in their right mind would believe them now with the same exact claims but about a different Israeli enemy? The Jerusalem Post, February 2013, headline, Netanyahu, Iran is closer than ever to a nuclear bomb. Quote, Iran is closer today than ever before to obtaining the necessary enriched uranium for a nuclear bomb, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Thursday evening. He was reacting to the publication of details of a confidential report by the International Atomic Energy Agency that Iran had begun installing advanced centrifuges at its main uranium enrichment plant. Netanyahu termed the report, quote, very grave, and said it proved that Iran was moving swiftly toward the red line he had set out the UN in September. He said during that address that Iran must be stopped before it crossed the line, something he said at the time could happen as early as the spring. Lots of domestic criticism happened in Israel at the time from Netanyahu's very exaggerated claims. Here, former Prime Minister Olmert criticizes Netanyahu's alarmism from Ynet News in April 2013. Olmert, Iranian threat is exaggerated. Former Prime Minister said the Iranian nuclear program is not progressing, calls on Netanyahu to work intelligently and calmly with U.S. leaders. So over and over, this is the sort of thing that has happened. Here from the Jerusalem Post, months later, July of 2013, Netanyahu, Iran is, quote, weeks away from crossing the red line. This is 2013, weeks away. The Times of Israel from January of 2013, Netanyahu, Iran set back only 6 weeks by nuclear deal. Prime Minister said the whole world knows Iran is after nukes. Final agreement will be the true test of Tehran's intentions. Here's the Times of Israel 3 years later, March of 2015, when Obama was negotiating the nuclear deal. Netanyahu, the deal will leave Iran, quote, less than a year away from having a bomb. Quote, the time Iran will need to break out of a nuclear program if it signs a deal with world powers in Lausanne, quote, will be reduced to less than a year and probably a lot less than that, the Prime Minister warned. Such a deal, whose emerging terms have been the subject of many reports, will, quote, pave the way to a nuclear weapon. That was the deal that ultimately was signed. Iran did not get a bomb in less than a year, to say nothing of far less than that. Do you see the relentless tsunami of propaganda coming from Israel, Netanyahu, and its legion of supporters trying to induce the United States to participate in an attack on Iran based on the sort of propaganda that induced the United States to attack Saddam Hussein? Look at how many times these warnings have been issued with great urgency. Iran is weeks away, months away. If you do the Iran deal, they're going to get it in a year or far less. None of it ever happens. At some point, a rational person has to start doubting these claims.